On this episode of Content Minded, my good friend Jewel Discase of the Innocent X Project, a podcast about art and literature on Patreon, joins me to discuss the book House of Leaves, the Divine Feminine in the Work of Art, as well as her position on current trends in the contemporary art world, and a bunch of other things, such as the books of Bret Easton Ellis and more. I'm, of course, your host, Gio Penichetti, artist, writer, podcaster, conversationalist, and you can help support the continuation of such Kino and Nectar content by going to patreon.com/genderproductions or substack.com/Gio's Content Corner. Both are only $5 a month. There are different tiers on the Patreon, which I am in the process of restructuring, and all the links will be found below, including the links to Jewel Disc's podcast and more. Thank you and enjoy. All right, there we go. And so I was just asking you if it was okay to refer to you by your name, Jessica, but we're both we're both faces and names, so it's probably cool. But I am here with Jewel Discase, and we're going to talk about in the continuing series of House of Leaves. I promised I would get like a feminine perspective, right? I would get an illustrious, I want to say, I mean, are you comfortable with the term art hoe or no? That's not.
That's fine. No, it's all good.
Yeah, well, an art appreciator and I believe a fellow old head as well. I've seen you around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jewel Discase or Jessica's, graced us with her presence. And I know it's so stupid pretending there's an audience, but there will be an audience eventually. So before we get into House of Leaves, just give us a general introduction. You have a really great podcast that I quite enjoy, where you talk about, with your co-host, you talk about various works of art and other things. It is the Innocent X Project. And you talk a lot about the history of art. But yeah, just give your general introduction. Like, you've been around for a while, have you not? As I have as well. So yeah.
In terms of being around, you mean sort of like right-wing Twitter style,
or even just like Twitter in general? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I guess I'll say that I love Twitter. It's definitely had, lots of ups and downs, but I was talking with someone the other day about how I was never able to like attach to any other social media app. Like I've never used Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. So Twitter is really the one for me for sure.
Yeah.
And I like you said, like Alana and I have a podcast called Innocent X. It's about the history of art. So it tends to oscillate back and forth between more the types of things that people would think of as art history, like talking about old masters, past movements in art, like the Viennese actionists. But we talk about contemporary art as well, which is, I think, like kind of brave of us.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, same with me. Yeah. Definitely. I admire that.
Because it's very, like, I just really feel like you do kind of have to, I mean, I do respect it when somebody is a sort of, like when they have like their era and they kind of like cloister within that era. And I definitely don't mind like a really, really sort of like fanatical, like encyclopedic, deep dive into specific periods. But certainly a lot of people have a lot to say about, good art versus bad art, degenerate art versus illustrious art. And they are so obviously not really that interested in art at all. And so I do feel like it's, I'm not a total contemporary art denier personally.
Yeah. I mean, I personally think most of these conversations are a waste of time because it's being fought. Well, it's hard to say because I mean, obviously ideology is a part of artwork. I mean, it is true. I mean, it's sort of like, I know it's such a cliched phrase, but it's true. The woke more correct about, being like everything is political inherently. But I mean, in a sense, especially in this day and age, which I think is in a way we could talk about with House of Leaves in terms of a work of pure postmodern literature. But it seems that like recently, it's funny because I was actually, after we record this tomorrow on Digital Archipelago with me and Prude, we're actually covering this essay about Hannah Arendt in terms of politics and aesthetics. But it just seems like the debate is so fruitless because instead of sort of trying to find why a particular period in art's history informs someone's worldview or ideology, it's more of just the sort of giveness of a very nebulous construct that is trying to aim towards an eternal truth like beauty, but really is still sinking into like a sort of postmodern nebulous nature by just saying, well, we have this concept of beauty that floats in the air that, the libs are trying to deny, or like on the other side, like reactionaries are obsessed with like the cult of beauty a la Susan Sontag. And it seems that like what's actually being discussed is not really what's being discussed when it comes to, I don't know, what was the one recently? Jessica, was it oh my God, it was Picasso again.
I know.
You know what you mean? Yeah, go ahead, go. Like, what do you think of all this? This is just, I hate it. I'm going in my Vincent Gallo mode where I'm like overtly critical. I hate it. It's disgusting. These people are pigs.
Yeah, you're like, everyone's creeps. Everyone's creeping creepsters creeping around.
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like conflicted sometimes because I feel like sometimes when people ask questions that irritate like the institutionalized mind around art. So I would, include myself in that, like, where if you're coming from a sort of like academic background,
Right.
it takes a long time to eradicate some of the some of the institutionalization that happens from that. So sometimes it can be good for people to ask questions that bother that sensibility, and I like a dumb question or whatever. But then there's other questions where, I don't know, like when people have this sort of back and forth about whether Picasso is good, whether he's good because he could do realistic illustration versus his later work, like that I guess it's just, I don't know, it's like I probably feel the same as you, where it's just like there is no more juice in that to me. Like it's like it just doesn't, it has no bearing on anything, or at least like it doesn't like I guess I feel like that's like a path that like other people have to like work out for themselves, because it's old news.
Yeah.
Me, you know?
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of a question. Did you do, what did you do in university, art history or?
Yeah, I did I did an MFA, and in undergrad I did art history, fine art, and philosophy too.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
I did philosophy and politics, but a lot of that had to do with art philosophy and art. Like that was my concentration. But I wanted to ask you though, it seems the more I think about it, it seems weird to me that, like, what would you assess as the sort of place of fine art in our world? Because it seems that even just like something that I don't particularly want to talk about, which is this recent uptick in this debate over Picasso, but it seems that a lot of people, I know people on our side, like, well, the political right, have this thing about that the contemporary left certainly promotes modern art, or at least it did promote what they refer to as modern art, but you could assert, of course, categorize as contemporary art or abstraction or the New York School or whatever. But it seems that, like, in actuality, the vast majority of people from what I've observed, especially writing my forthcoming book
Mm.
on the political left, it seems that their sort of main aesthetic enjoyment comes from what you could broadly term the culture industry, and it seems that fine art in the world, except for like maybe a few small pockets of people, in terms of mass consciousness, don't really have the same degree of effect that, for example, Jackson Pollock had in the 50s, at least in terms of shocking audiences or whatever. But even in terms of like, even like illustration, like if you look at like, you know, the anti Pollock, which is Norman Rockwell, the golden age of illustration, it seems that like illustration now is like, you know, my slop, like my video games and animation and poorly done avatars from these like MB kids with Wacom tablets. It seems like that's the main aesthetic enjoyment, whereas like actual artistic modernism, it's like it becomes a culture war bauble, but nobody actually really is investing the time into appreciating it. Like, or at least that's how I feel. I don't know. And of course, like on the right wing, they have like the other thing about like aesthetic posters, and that becomes slopified as well. I know that term is overused, but what do you think of like the state of like modern, like contemporary art or the art world nowadays?
Well, I think that the state of contemporary art is extremely bad, and I think that because like that's part of why I was interested in doing an art podcast, which is certainly something that no one wants, is because I wanted to have like a sort of like a document almost for myself, just because you know, it's almost like in the way that people sort of talk about how you know, like after COVID, like now sort of seeing maybe like an aesthetic, like an aesthetic form of recalling COVID, like you know, in movies or in in these sort of, yeah, like creating some kind of timeline. It's just like I think that there's I think that there's been several people have like noticed that at least post, I would say, to 2010, contemporary art took a really like hard turn. Not to say that there weren't many things like building up to that moment. It wasn't like an unexpected turn, but it took a very hard turn between 2010 and today, and it's you know, in shambles. Like it's awful. It's really bad.
What did it turn towards? And for those who don't know, I will of course link to your podcast. So
oh, thank you.
I highly recommend everybody. She's great. She's beautiful. The best. So I highly recommend checking out. Yeah. I recently released this great episode with Zach Brown. I think you would really like it because he's
yes. And Zach,
friend of mine.
Yeah, and Zach is a beautiful painter, wonderful painter.
But what would the contemporary art world, like when you say hard turn, what did it turn towards?
Well, I guess like the short answer would be like activism. And
of course,
the like short answer would be activism, identity politics. There was also, that was also sort of like the peak of an academic turn that had been going on for a long time, that was about a sort of like having a kind of like self-reflexive like a self-reflexive like gesture away from the established norms of like a museum or gallery. So like over the course of the early 2000s, you see a lot more there's a revival of performance art that comes, you know, you could say like the one big one was in the 70s, another big one was in the early 2000s. They were both like pretty annoying, if you ask me. And
you mean like from Anna Mendieta to like Bilotti in the 90s?
Yeah, like in the 70s, you have kind of like that, you know, some of the like dangerous like edgelord stuff, like Chris Burden or like Maritzi or
Ray Abramovic,
Vito Acconci, like that type of stuff. And then in the early 2000s, you have more like the Ritkrit Terra Venetia, like making dinner art project stuff.
Yeah, that was good actually. I quite
No.
oh well, I mean,
I know what you're saying, but I don't. The relational aesthetics like turn. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people have the relational aesthetics thing is very interesting because there's a lot of like fertile ground you could do with it, but it's just the artists that do it. It's like make people walk through a box. It's like okay, well,
yeah, and so all of this, like to me, like all of this to me, not just with activism, but also with a kind of distancing from like visual experience in general. Like there, you can tell that everything moves a little bit further and further away from the primacy of a visual connection and more towards an intellectual connection, a sort of almost like art historical, like a referential connection becomes like really important for people. And I guess this is part of, yeah. And so I would say like and I don't think that any of this is a coincidence because it's happening alongside, like I said, like there were things building up to this moment, but what really sort of fries it is that I would say like around 2010, you could sort of pinpoint as maybe one of the first times where almost everyone now is carrying a smartphone. And
yes.
And so I would say that like between then and now, contemporary art has very seriously failed to respond to the way that using a phone, the interaction with the phone, and the the paradigmatic shift of having your visual experiences almost entirely exist on like a device that you're carrying. They don't know how to deal with that. They haven't known how to deal with that. And so what happens when you go to a museum, or even a better example would be like, a commercial art gallery or a small art gallery, is nothing is going to hit as hard as the 50,000 images you get to like put straight into your brain every moment on the phone.
Yeah, that's like, and some artists have attempted it, like John Rathman. But what's funny is that it seems that the smartphone has revived, and like it seems that in the I would say towards the 90s to the 2000s, seems that the critic was like a thing of the past. But it seems that the critic has like been able to use this social media technology more effective than the artists themselves. Like it seems like, for example, Brad Trammell is an expert at this with his Instagram videos. I quite love him. I want to get him on the show one day. I don't know. I hope, I'm trying to reoptic myself to get him, on the show. But so I think that in some ways there has been like sort of weird attempts, like Sanford Biggers will put like QR codes next to the Chimera statues, and like Marina Abramovic doing like an AI dance. But that's very like bathing in the technology rather than trying to what did Norman Mailer say would he define genius as? A sort of like escape from the given. It seems that the artist is basking within the given. You know what? Comment on that. We have to get to House of Leaves. I suddenly realized that I have to get you and your co-host on the show about contemporary art, because I think this is a fascinating conversation. But I booked this thing as a House of Leaves discussion, and my fans know I'm very terrible at getting to the point. But yeah, comment in this sort of thing of like the escape from the given as opposed to the contemporary artist sort of like embracing the given in sort of like, what would you say, a bid to keep relevant? Or
yeah, I mean, I think like, just quickly, like there have been attempts to, like the entire sort of net art, that was like a short sort of phrase that was going around for a while. I wouldn't say that has, I don't know. I wouldn't say that anything has totally successfully created any kind of movement, you know, like I think that's sort of like part of what is lacking, is that like you can have individuals who may like respond to certain technologies or adopt certain technologies, but in terms of like a cohesive aesthetic movement,
Yeah.
I would say that happens a lot. Like you see that happening more in an authorless way, which I think is kind of interesting, because it's not really something that you see individual artists doing, but something that kind of happens within the way, like within like the way things can be viral, like the viral movement works. So just like a small example I would give was like the MAGA hat, right? Like I was like, that was sort of like, you could see that became that was a visual, that was a creation, like a physical creation. It was a visual image, and its image sort of multiplied into having its own kind of charge and its own kind of meaning, especially in 2016. Like I remember buying one just because, even though like
My friend gave me one. Yeah.
Well, I bought one even though I don't live in the United States. So I was just like, you know, but I was like, I want to have one of these because I can tell that it's an important, like iconic visual like object that's existing right now. So there's so this is all I mean, is that like contemporary art is not doing well, but that is something completely different from what I would think of as like this, you know, the spirit of art that is animated in many different things, you know. So I'm not like blackpilling in that way.
Yeah, and even the hat itself is sort of in a weird way, I wouldn't say transcended Trump, because that's impossible, but certainly transcended in terms of people's perception of like the actuality of Trump versus the aesthetic image of Trump, right? Like people, I remember back in 2016, I think it was it a New York Times writer or a New Yorker writer that compared it to a Klan hood?
Yeah,
and that's obvious comparison, right? But like, it's in terms of like from that perspective, but it seems that the MAGA hat has made its way into so many memes. And I think even Brad Trammell said this, that the contemporary artist is sort of disarmed when it comes to meme culture, because they don't allow themselves that space to like sort of explore. Maybe not to say that like memes are the art of the future. I mean, memes are the art of the now. But yeah, I wonder if there's something there.
Well, it was just like, I just thought that, or at least like the MAGA hat just sort of came into my mind because it's in terms of like when you look at examples in history of, you know, these sort of like eternal works of art, these great works of art that obviously they tend to come with a certain degree of like scandal or shock, because there is iconoclasm that happens. Like I'm like, well, we do have modern masterpieces, we have contemporary masterpieces in that vein, but they're not necessarily made by artists right now,
right?
You know. And it's just, I find that like when it's just, I try to have a little bit of balance between saying like art proper, the institutional realm of art, is in the garbage, but you know, the spirit lives on.
There's castles everywhere. Yeah. That's like what Bo Jared said about a certain event that happened in 2001. You know,
Word.
Yeah, but it's funny because to move on to House of Leaves, it seems that like it really is an expression of the modern nowhere land we find ourselves. But before we get into that, like just a really basic question would be, how did you discover and how did you fall in love with House of Leaves? Like, what's your story around the book?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I read House of Leaves when I was a lot younger. I think I was still a teenager. And I think that I probably have like the most absolutely typical story about this, where it was just like somebody told me that it was the most horrifying book they had ever read. It was so scary and it was like true terror to read it. And I read it, and I think like everyone, I was somewhat indifferent to the Zampano Johnny Truant aspects. I was most interested in the Navidson Report documentary chapters.
Yeah, the Navidson record. Yeah.
Yeah, and then have the most vivid memories, certainly, of the sort of like concrete poetry writing style descent through whatever the falling sequence, you know.
Yeah.
So I had not revisited the book in a super long time, and it was interesting to revisit it now because I don't know if I would say that I am in love with it, but I would say that there's so much going on that I think I'm interested to hear your feelings about all these disparate elements of that book.
Yeah. So I remember one person on Reddit said that if you view it as a love story or sort of like a hopeless romantic story of Johnny Truant, then you can almost sense like a gothic nature to it. There's this essay I read before doing this interview, this discussion rather. I mean, interview sounds so formal. About like sort of House of Leaves reviving in a weird like sort of postmodern gothic literature. But I think like to me it's like foundational as a piece of literature for the 20th century because what occupies the mind of millennials and zoomers is sort of like a sort of crushing absence of everyday life that then becomes an element of nostalgia that gets cemented in the culture industry. Before this, I was actually watching for another podcast of Content Minded. I was actually watching a lot of found footage horror movies, and a lot of them are crap, right? A lot of them are, but then some of them actually are quite good because there's sort of that breaking of the narrative of everyday life, the way that traditional horror movies or horror literature does, where you're given this sort of fantasy land, whereas the found footage genre, from its very inception with Cannibal Holo, I can't say the name on YouTube. Cannibal,
really?
Yeah, there's a lot of things.
Cost?
Exactly, yeah, Cannibal H Cost. From its very inception, it gives you a warping of the real, but nevertheless, it sort of leaves you hanging in terms of the ambiguity of it. And I think like House of Leaves, the way that it's structured, the way that there's an ambiguity in terms of its authorship, in terms of its interpretations, it really is sort of like a work that I think has cemented itself in the 21st century. And the fact that like lost media, back rooms, liminal spaces, like all of these things that in particular younger people really love to sort of scare themselves with or find a weird intrigue in. There's something there, you know, like
for sure, yeah.
But lastly, I would say before I want to get your opinion is that to me, I look at more as a sort of piece of a mythological tale or an odyssey, and the fact that there's like replete with mythological images, sort of like references to the Greek Isle of Delos, the dreams that Navidson has, or we could talk about as well. But yeah, what did you think of it though?
Well, I mean, I remember even early on the very tight and evocative like sentence that you can say like that, you know, it is always sort of the first thing described about the plot of the book is that a house that is bigger on the inside than the outside. That was sort of the catch to me, and I found that looking at it again now, like I was most taken with the relationship to the unspace in it, you know, and I just, you know, even when you're saying like when that people are interested in looking at it as a love story and stuff, for some reason, like all of the interpersonal, I understand that there's sort of like people tend to say that the house is a metaphor for grief or something, but I don't know. Yeah, I kind of preferred to just look at it as a physics and space like
Yeah.
like document, you know, like it's like, because I do think that the house, I don't know, I think that's a brilliant premise. I think that's like an
Mhm.
excellent premise for a ghost story or a horror story. And like you're saying about the sort of the way that it fits in with found footage horror, Blair Witch kind
Oh
of
yeah.
stuff of that time, that's totally true. And it's kind of, I feel like one of the great things that you get from it being um, written as a novel, and also as this sort of, because it's kind of it's kind of presented as this like really stuffed like dossier, you
Hmm.
know. And
Hmm.
and I
Half academic work. Yeah.
yeah, I really appreciated, like, I really loved the amount of time that's given to the whole process of, you know, the process of discovery about the hallway, the measurements, the details around how to get in and out of these excavate. Like, I thought there was a very nice transition from the sort of like haunted house, like it reminded me, you know how in The Exorcist it takes a
Mm.
long time for things to really start going, you know, and you have there's, you know, the first like 45 minutes or an hour of The Exorcist are just like normal people responding the way normal people would to
Right.
something like that happening, you know.
Yeah.
And that's, I thought that that was kind of happening in this book as well, with the relationship to the house getting bigger on the
Yeah. What
inside.
would you do exactly? Like, how would you
Mhm.
logically respond to this? You know.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but do you think that one of my favorite parts? I covered this in another episode with Jay Burden,
Mhm.
who also read the book. We went over the various. I mean, they're all fake, by the way, but they're like
Mhm.
real people.
Mhm.
Some of them, at least. One of my favorite moments was the Camille Paglia
Mhm.
blurb about House of Leaves.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, a risk of sounding gauche,
Mhm.
because I don't want to like give you, because I don't want to give you this sort of like what did Griselda Pollock say in her one book, or on art criticism, like the sort of like, here's a woman that's an
Yeah.
artist, and that's the whole thing, is that it's a
Mhm.
woman who's an art. It's like, so it's like, here's a woman who's an art critic, who's a podcast. It's like, I don't want to do that to you, but I think like at risk of sounding gauche,
It's fine.
what would your interpretation be? I mean, as a woman, oh, that sounds terrible. That sounds terrible. But you know,
It's okay.
as a woman, there's this one part that Polly has said, and of course, like this is typical. Especially, you have to realize that when Dan Lusky was writing this was in the mid '90s to the 2000s.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
is when Polly was like the renegade
Mhm.
academic feminist, right?
Mhm.
It's not like the reactionary chud red scare philosopher Polly nowadays.
Mhm.
Um, so of course, like Camille Paglia goes about, well, of course, it's the female womb, and it's the confrontation with the terror that men penetrating into the womb of the unknown. And
Mhm.
so, but as a sort of a reader who is, uh, what would be like your sort of like, I guess what I'm asking is that what would be a sort of like feminine perspective that you take from House of Leaves? I mean, for example, his wife, Karen, was her name Karen Green?
Mhm.
His wife Karen's traumatic story, the Wallstow letters with Johnny Truant's mother going
Mhm.
crazy in the home. Like, what would your overall perspective be? Because I think, like, not to like reify it, like, I brought a woman on to do this, like, I hate that stuff, right? But I think, like, for like the way of framing it, I think
Yeah.
it's apt to ask you, like, as a woman yourself, like, what would your
Mhm.
nuanced and particular perspective be in House of Leaves, as opposed to someone like myself or the men that I brought on to do this series in House of Leaves?
Well, and no sweat. It's cool. It's cool. This is a DEI episode.
No,
Um,
to be clear, you're not a DI pick. There's other ones, but yeah, go ahead.
no, it's cool. So I guess one thing that I think of with all of this is, you know, because like I said, it sort of transitions at the beginning from this kind of haunted house ghost story to almost like an adventure an adventure excavation like mission, right? Like towards the end. And I thought it is very true that, you know, like I was thinking about the like the incident of when you see footage of people who go into caves, and like you see those videos of people who are crawling in, like, you know, a 5-inch crack of like a stone, you know, like a stone between the bottom of the cave and the ceiling. It's like 5 inches, and they're just like on their bellies, like with their headlamps and stuff. And like, it's not, you don't have to be a genius to make an observation about the perversity, like the perversity that's evident in a person like crawling through a long, dark, tight, wet chamber, right? And so it's like, in some ways I'm like, yeah, that's like, I wonder if there is a deeper interpretation, but it's such a clear, like that's such a, it's so clearly asks itself to be interpreted that way, you know? And like, so I guess with the house story, like as the men kind of like pack up and go on this mission, like I guess I would just think about how like I have had a long standing belief that you know, when people who are drawn to mountain climbing and caving too, these are like two areas of adventure that I truly don't understand in a certain way. And I've actually become convinced that it's like they're like motivated by a sort of like supernatural force. Like there's that like they almost like lack free will in this way. And I think that that's kind of that felt like it was kind of, you know, reinforced in the book, because there is sort of a pause. Like, I don't know, when you read it, are you asking yourself like, why is Will doing this? Like, why does he have to keep going?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's also like in the middle of the book, there's the three interpretations that these fake academics, but in this world of House of Leaves, they're real, but like to us, they're not real. They come up with the criteria of like why Novitzin went back to save his brother, which seems kind of obvious, but like when you're confronted with the reality of like the house swallowing your brother whole, and your kids barely escaping, and so on and so forth, it's like, why would you go back? Like in every horror movie, it seems like there's this somewhat stupid in hindsight decision to go back, but it's almost like there is like an animal magnetism. I mean, in House of Leaves, there's a literal animal, or there's a sort of animalistic impulse that is like when Holloway goes crazy, for example. It seems that there's something that like is a supernatural force, but is it just that our own innate human impulse to explore and to discover and to conquer? Is it that, or is it there actually something there compelling it?
This is, I think, what I mean in terms of like one area where I feel like there is actually like a distinction between what you could say is like the feminine interpretation and the masculine one, is that like I feel that probably I can't understand the impulse for exploration in that way. I really can't, even though like intellectually I do sort of get it and respect like like you say, you're like this is an innate human instinct to explore and conquer and blah blah blah. But I guess from my perspective, I'm like, that's very male. That's specifically male. And like the sort of you know, and I know that there are all these kind of personal things that happen in the story which would give him more reasons for coming back, but I'm like, the second that I discovered that the hallway was 2 feet longer than the outside of the house, like just sell the house. Like, you know? I'm like, that's it. Like it's there's something wrong here, you know? Like, don't keep going down the hallway.
And it seems that Danilewski is aware of that, because Karen, for the most part, is I wouldn't say uninquisitive, but rather her instincts kicks in of like, okay, what about the children? She's doing like feng shui to cope with like,
Yeah.
very like 90s new age like way of
Mhm.
coping with a house that's sort of turned against her family.
Mhm.
And she's sort of sitting not passive, but she then becomes a sort of savior archetype later. And some people have accused Danilewski of writing like ridiculous people accuse him of writing sexist tropes or whatever. But the sort of like
Mhm.
feminine savior archetype is a very powerful one, because only when her entire edifice of a family life is threatened does she then bravely go into the house in a
Mhm.
way that is very instinctual and spiritual, as opposed to the sort of like, Faustian man, I must explore type
Mhm.
of way.
Mhm.
And if people want to write that off as bad, I mean, I understand intellectually a criticism of that in terms of feminist theory, but like, I think there's obviously something there. Like, uh, women in a weird way are compelled to do great things when instinct and when spirit demands it. Whereas men sort of like have this, in a lot of ways, stupid ability to go headlong into it without
Mhm.
really considering the consequences in a weird way. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just not like I just think that they just tend to be built differently for those things, like intellectually, physically, like it's like, do you remember hearing about how maybe like I don't know, 6 months or 8 months ago there was those astronauts in the ISS, and there was a female astronaut up there who apparently was going insane.
Yeah. She's like drilling holes in the wall.
She was like, drilling holes in the space station 'cause she wanted to get back onto Earth so bad. And it's like, yeah, I mean, not, I'm sure there are like some women who can handle it, but it just is not really. There's not really much precedent for that, and
Right.
so it's like, um, I mean, I think that is, uh, I think that in like that specific in that specific realm of like the sort of the risk of going into the complete unknown, into going into completely inhospitable, um, highly dangerous
Mhm.
environments for reasons that aren't even really understood, like that's sort of the thing with like, even though they do have, they have things that they're trying to get information when they go through the the house that keeps getting larger and larger and is becoming a labyrinth,
Mhm.
but it's like, but ultimately they don't really know what they want from it or what will happen in there. They just have to go to do it,
Yeah.
hmm
Well, Novitzin being a seasoned photojournalist in various like
hmm
war and famine situations, I think that was also another key indicator of his mindset.
hmm
He was sort of like compelled to do it,
hmm
but it's like, for example, like oh, this is a cornball example, but like the original Dawn of the Dead was much more logically consistent, where they left well, except for Flyboy going crazy, but like they left because they had to, because of the biker gang. But the 2004 Dawn of the Dead, which I mean, in terms of visuals, was superior. And that was like the as much as I detest her politics, I think Sarah Polley is a great actress, and
hmm
she did play a very good role in it, because in the middle of it you have Ving Rhames, who's like, I'm not going to die here. We're going to go to this island on this guy's boat that we don't even know is still there, an island that we don't even know is still like
hmm
uninfected. It's like, why would you leave them all? Why? Like, it's just stupid.
hmm
And everybody dies because of it, right?
hmm
So it's the same thing of like making a principled stance when the principle is nonsense.
hmm hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, it's just compulsion. It's just sort of like, I must, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Um, but you mentioned, and a lot of people, I think, because the story of House of Leaves is so heavily centered around the Novitzin record,
Mhm.
that people sort of like will actively skip over or browse the Johnny Truant story. But then, was there a moment that you read it again or discovered meaning in it that related to the overall book? Or what do you make of the figure of Johnny Truant as like a low life sort of trying to get by in the world? He very much is like one half a sensitive young man, the other half like sort of California wasto that in a way he's like almost ahead of his time in a weird way. Yeah.
Did you ever read those zines Comet Bus?
I think I've heard of them. I never read them though.
It was by this like crust punk guy, I guess. Like he was from California, I think, but he had these zines. His name was Aaron Comet Bus, and I remember reading a bunch of those when I was like super young. But I straight up just grafted those two characters together in my mind. Like when I was looking over this again, I was just like, oh yeah, this is Aaron Comet Bus, except it's Johnny Truant, which is just like, there are a lot of elements like looking at it now that are so like they're so like when they're the sort of like postmodern novel, some of the names, some of the like a lot of the formatting, like it was interesting to sort of revisit it now because I almost felt like unable to kind of like engage with each respective like story really. Like when I would read the Johnny parts, I just sort of like would glide over it but the book kind of to me now is almost like it's almost like performance art in book form.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And so the way that everything, I don't know, like, do you find it with this? Like, I felt like everything is very deliberately like, disrupting your ability to like follow any one story or sort of even like believe in each of the stories in this way. And so there was definitely a different degree of like self-consciousness I found this time, where I was like, I don't know, like I wonder what, like I feel like people, like I'm kind of interested in the way that there's like so much like media around trying to like decode the book in this way, but to me it doesn't really feel like there's a ton of like decoding. It feels more like everything is very clearly like an exercise in writing,
yes. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that it's very hard to, I mean, of course House of Leaves, because of the sort of from 2010s till 2020s, and especially like, Clownvid really accelerated this because the world became a weird form of a liminal space or a form of a pure absence. This is like, for example, what Giorgio Agamben was writing about in his blog post during the time. So I think like it has entered this sort of like slop video essay fodder cycle,
For sure.
I mean, we're doing it right now, but like, I think, but I think like, what would you say?
You can call it like the feminine gaze on House of Leaves explained. Ending explained.
Oh, that's great! I'm using that. Yeah. That was like I came up with this title for a podcast. I don't know if I could release though. With a controversial woman writer, I was going to call it "To Drown a Rose," because her name is Rose, and it's the "Death in June" song Douglas did with what's her name, McDowell. What's her? She's a very famous Irish folk singer.
Right.
Yeah. So I thought that was a great title, but I'm like, I don't know if I can release this. This is like, but anyway.
Okay, that seems pretty niche. Like I wouldn't.
Do you know Rose Liddon?
No.
Yeah. Well, she's a great writer. She's a great writer. We did The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath.
Oh, nice.
So No, but like that's a great tell. But like what you were saying though, I think that the need to decode is inherent within the sort of like current media lens of critique itself, where like critique and discourse is embedded in the thing itself. And it's the only lens from which you can like have the quote unquote proper interpretation of something, or the media literate interpretation of something. But like you were saying, I think Danilewski's doing this very interesting exercise in writing, because if you remember, it wasn't really meant to be a full book till later, because he was doing this as a series of blog posts.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, in the early 2000s.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So it was published the way, like similarly to how you would read it in the book that was published as blog posts initially.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
He was trying to revive like the piecemeal writing that great writers such as like Steinbeck and
like serialized writing.
Yeah. Dickinson. I'm having a total brain fart. Oliver Twist.
Charles Dickens.
Charles Dickens, yeah. Sorry, I got confused with Emily Dickinson. But yeah, Charles Dickens, Steinbeck, like a lot of great Anglo writers that were like basically being paid for the word, right? So he was doing this in blog post form. So I think like to him it kind of was an exercise in writing. Like, and the stories, they kind of collide with each other a little bit, but there is no grand overarching narrative, because that's the point. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. It's like, you want to live in postmodernity, but it's like, well, you don't really want to live in postmodernity. You know, I think Sam Chris was actually saying something about this recently. Like, no one really wants to live. Everyone wants to like live in David Foster Wallace world. They don't want to live in Bret Easton Ellis world. Like, that's just too uncertain. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like they sort of, like, things that feel extremely postmodern, like this type of thing does, like, it's really different in 2000 because you still have enough like vapor of like legacy, the turn of the century. There was still enough like vapor running that, you know, you could sort of indulge in this like deconstruction mode, you know? And so it's like people can say like, oh, the classic novel, the classic painting, these sort of classic works of art, we're bored. Let's like cut them, let's dissect them, let's cut them up, let's mess with the form, let's be really meta about all of this. And that was not actually as horribly like obnoxious as it is now. And I feel like part of that is because now it's been long enough that people are like, well, but it's not like we actually have novels or paintings or like films, or, you know, like it's like I think there's like a sense that everyone knows that there is a great deal of like confusion and a true dearth of like vision in these ways. And so the kind of like the type of like Derrida approach feels, I think it feels more ominous now. It feels like that was, you know, like a warning that was not acknowledged properly at the time, because it didn't seem like any big deal, but now that's almost all there is. And I don't think it's very satisfying to people.
There's cut up, but there's no reconstruction in a weird way. And that's great, because I think that's a great observation, because I think that people are uncertain about it and want something. They want a narrative. They want a grand arch. And I think the only thing that, which I personally think is a lament, I think is terrible. The only thing that can give them that is essentially culture industry slob. Star Wars, Disneyfied Star Wars, action cape shit, you know, like those are the only things that people, in terms of aesthetic enjoyment, really deliver them a grander narrative, which itself is kitsch. And so I think like House of Leaves, it speaks to our time, but like you were saying, in hindsight, it becomes a lament rather than something that in the time of writing in the mid 90s to early 2000s in these blog posts are exciting and fresh and new. And like, I'll read you this essay on House of Leaves. It's called, and it's public access. It's by Sean Tavers. It's called Empty Constructs, Postmodern Gothic House of the Empty Constructs, the Postmodern Haunted House in Mark Danilewski's House of Leaves. And then he says, and this is around the, I want to say, second page or so. He talks about the problem of nihilism. Defined by lack of values, according to Alan Pratt, in his essay Nihilism, this extreme skepticism would towards the all-embracing foundations that we have relied on to make sense of the world is disturbing, because when we, quote, expose all cherished beliefs and sacrosanct truths as symptoms of a defective Western mythos, life is revealed as nothing. And nothingness is the source of not only absolute freedom, but also existential horror and emotional anguish. Defined by a lack of value, meaning and identity, then, life for the postmodern subject is, quote, terrifying, unreal, and indefinable. And then Bellevue, Marina Bellevue, a great art critic in her own right, in Gothic postmodernism is in this experience that preoccupies Gothic postmodern literature. The dissolution of reality and subjectivity is emphasized in perverse themes of uncertainty and disruption, and is present throughout traditional Gothic tropes, including supernatural occurrences and possession. Typically, features of Gothic postmodernism also include incoherent, ambiguous endings, the blurring of boundaries between reality and the supernatural, and most significantly, the undermining of basic assumptions about reality. And then, of course, she's citing Bret Easton Ellis's Lunar Park as an example. I've never read Lunar Park. What's Lunar Park about?
Lunar Park is, I think it's Bret Easton Ellis's attempt at like parodying Stephen King.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And so it's very basically it's about it places him, Bret Easton Ellis, as the protagonist, but he, you know, like there's an introduction where he references like, I wrote a book, it became famous, I wrote another book, it was just as famous, feminists got really mad at me, like it's, you know, like it's like auto fiction. And then but then he writes the character of himself as now somehow settled down with an actress with like, and they have kids, and one of their kids gets a gremlin doll called a Turby, and the Turby becomes possessed and starts terrorizing. Yeah, they get a Labubu, and it terrorizes their family.
No one's gonna get that reference in 6 months. Yeah. So then what happens? What happens after?
It's just like I forget how. I mean, I think it, you know, I think it kind of wraps up somehow, but I think you would like it. It's really good. Like it's very it is really like it's really really obviously like his sort of just exercise of being Stephen King. Like, you know how when you read Stephen King, like every single chapter ends on like a total cliffhanger, and you have and you like you constantly have to keep reading because it's like always kind of like dangling something.
Oh, that's so kitschy. That's so culture industry trash.
Yeah, he does that too. Like he does it like perfectly in it.
Oh man, that's great. That's like I don't know why, I guess maybe because like my personality is kind of the opposite, but like I really love like the sort of literary or artistic figure that's like a brash confrontational asshole. Guys like, you know, like Vincent Gallo or Norman Mailer, or like, you know, like Easton Ellis himself. Like it's, oh, that's great. He's
really like, it's funny because I don't like I was thinking before we started recording this how like I don't really even like read books that much anymore. Like I used to read books all the time, but now I'm just kind of like nah, like post books. post movies. And but I do really respect Bret Easton Ellis a lot, and I think he's very funny, and I think that he does like I really like that he I like that he's brave enough to do very obvious like genre work like that. And so like even his book, the sequel that he wrote to Less Than Zero, is called Imperial Bedrooms, And that book is amazing. And I just thought that it was like, you know, it's like, it almost reminds me a lot of like David Lynch doing the Twin Peaks season 25 years later. I think it was like the same, it's kind of the same premise. It's just like having your sort of like big, like your big early project, and then revisiting it and having it be much more deep, dark, horrifying.
Thank you for listening to the Content Minded podcast. If you wish to support me and listen to every episode in full, then please go to patreon.com/giantartproductions and substack.com/Gio's Content Corner. There you will find the full archive of every Content Minded episode, as well as every Giant Art Review episode, and exclusive to all patrons, the weekly Cole Report, where I break down interesting stories and discourse from throughout the week. Subscribe today to keep the content renaissance alive.